Depth 12, the signal below. Log entry, March 3rd, 1998. Station depth 12. Time, 4:17. Noise detected across all channels. Unsure if it's mechanical or biological. Recovered transmission archive, OceanTech Institute. When Michael rejoined the Depth 12 program, he wasn't chasing adventure, he was escaping silence. After 15 years, designing sonar mapping systems for OceanTech, he'd reached that point where every morning felt like the same calculation repeated endlessly. His wife Sarah, a hospital radiologist, used to joke that he loved machines because they didn't argue back. But beneath that joke was a truth. The distance between them had been growing, quietly, for years. When he signed the contract, Sarah didn't protest. She just said, "You always wanted the ocean more than me. Now you can have it." Her tone wasn't cruel, just tired, the kind of tired that settles behind the eyes when you stop expecting people to change. The Depth 12 mission was publicly described as an oceanographic survey of low-frequency anomalies in deep-water sound channels. Privately, it was something else. OceanTech's internal memo, later leaked in 2003, revealed the truth. They were testing an autonomous acoustic relay system, a network of transmitters meant to detect non-natural harmonics beneath the continental shelf. What exactly those harmonics were, no one outside the project ever learned. The descent capsule carrying the crew left the surface on March 4th, 1998, 5 a.m. The support vessel, Horizon, recorded the last footage before radio blackout. Sarah stood on deck, hair whipping in the wind, clutching a coffee cup that had long gone cold. She leaned close to the glass dome of the capsule where Michael's Saturday, already sealed in. Her lips moved. No one heard what she said. Decades later, when the recording was digitally enhanced, analysts isolated 6 words: "If you hear silence, come back." That became the final message she ever sent him. OceanTech internal log, March 5th, 1998. Depth 12 has reached operational depth, 10,240 feet. Crew reports stable conditions. Visual sensors compromised by particulate density. Hydrophones registering intermittent irregularities, possibly subaqueous drift. Maintain observation. Continued transmission every 6 hours. At the surface, communications officers Robert Hayes logged the updates by hand. He'd worked down scenes of missions like this, and all of them began with the same rhythm: structured, technical, predictable. But by the third report, the signal carried a strange undertone. Not static, not feedback, something else. He described it later as a whisper, buried under white noise, breathing through metal. Inside Depth 12, the crew of 12 went about their routines. The air smelled faintly of oil and salt. Condensation collected along the steel beams like sweat. Michael spent his shifts in the technical core, monitoring acoustic readings and system diagnostics. The hum of the machinery felt almost alive, a pulse running through the walls. When the hydrophones detected fluctuations, the team assumed turbulence or a geological tremor. But the signal pattern repeated, slow, steady, deliberate. Commander Robert Blake, ex-Navy, dismissed it at first. "Whales, echo distortions. Don't feed the myths," he told them. But Dr. Elaine Porter, the mission's oceanographer, wasn't so sure. She'd studied deep-sea resonance for years. "This isn't random," she said quietly. "It's structured." Michael saved the recording to a secure drive, labeling it Anomaly 04. Later analysis would reveal 12 rhythmic pulses, followed by 12 seconds of silence. Then the same sequence again. March 8, transmissions became erratic. Surface control received partial messages, interrupted mid-sentence. When Hayes replayed the static in slow motion, he realized the interference wasn't random. It mirrored the same 12-beat rhythm. He played it again, then reversed the track. It almost sounded like someone breathing through water. At 4:19 a.m., depth 12 stopped transmitting. The next morning, Sarah woke up before dawn, restless. She made 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and one for him, a habit she hadn't yet broken. When the news bulletin interrupted her routine, the words barely registered. Communication lost with OceanTech Experimental Facility Depth 12. Investigation pending. She called the project hotline. No answer. She called again and again until the automated voice said the line was no longer in service. Day 5. Headlines changed. Technical malfunction. Crew presumed lost. But the internal OceanTech memo, later declassified, used another phrase entirely. Unrecoverable anomaly. No coordinates, no wreckage, no explanation. Just silence and a missing husband whose last words were never recorded. 20 years later, in the quiet suburbs of Portland, Sarah still kept the same landline. She never remarried. Most nights she didn't even turn on the lights, preferring the company of that faint ocean hum that still played in her head. Then, one autumn evening in 2018, the phone rang. The number was unlisted, the line unstable, more static than sound. She almost hung up until she heard it. 12 rhythmic pulses, evenly spaced. Then, nothing. She stayed frowning, receiver in hand, her heart pounding in the silence. Somewhere deep below, under miles of water, Depth 12 had just answered back. Chapter 2, The Descent. Pressure steady at 10,000 feet. Oxygen levels within range. Unknown frequency detected, repeating at 12-beat intervals. Internal log, Depth 12, March 7, 1998. Inside Depth 12, days melted into one another. There were no sunrises, no nights, only the constant, mechanical heartbeat of pumps, and the faint hum of electricity running through the walls. The station existed in a kind of endless twilight, lit by thin strips of cold white light that gave every face a hollow reflection. Time didn't move forward, it circled. Michael began each shift the same way, checking diagnostics, reviewing sonar feeds, pretending he wasn't counting the hours since he last heard Sarah's voice. His crewmates joked that he'd married the console, but under the humor was unease. Everyone felt the pressure, both outside and within. Dr. Elaine Porter, chief oceanographer, was the calm center of the group. She'd spent half her life studying the soundscape of the deep ocean, a place she once called the last living silence on Earth. But lately, that silence had started talking back. On the evening of March 7th, while monitoring the sonar relay, Elaine noticed an anomaly, A faint pulse buried in the background noise, 12 beats. Pause, 12 beats again. It was too consistent for geological movement, too structured for an animal. Probably feedback, said Commander Robert Blake, not looking up from his report. But when the pattern appeared again, slightly shifted in frequency, even he frowned. All right, he said, mark it and log it. Could be natural resonance. Elaine leaned closer to the waveform, her reflection mirrored on the dark glass. It's not resonance, she whispered. It's rhythm. In the habitation module, the crew tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. They ate, played cards, told dry jokes about being the world's most expensive sardines. But fatigue crept in fast. The constant hum of machines blurred into a low vibration that rattled the bones. Some swore they could feel it not hear, but feel, deep in their chests, like another heartbeat aligning with their own. Michael started keeping a private log, writing notes by hand in a small black notebook. He wrote about the noise, about Sarah, about dreams of hearing voices underwater. There's something in the static. One entry read, "It's not trying to scare us. It's trying to be heard." March 8, 1998 to 14. Depth 12 to surface. We're detecting intermittent shifts in pressure. Signal interference continues, pattern repeating. Requesting data cross-check. Surface to depth 12. Data confirm normal. No anomalies on our end. Negative. It's not normal down here. It's everywhere. That phrase, "it's everywhere," became infamous years later, when OceanTech released the recovered logs. As the days went on, the line between structure and instinct began to blur. The hydrophones picked up strange distortions, echoes, that didn't belong to the crew's own transmissions. At times, it sounded like someone repeating their voices seconds after they spoke. Blake ordered all audio tests suspended for 24 hours. The crew protested, not because they disagreed, but because silence was worse. Without the constant pinging of sonar, the ocean around them felt alive, listening. Elaine noticed the first physical effect on day 12. Tiny fractures began forming on the transparent dome of the observation window. They weren't caused by pressure. The readings were stable. The cracks formed in a perfect circular pattern, like ripples flouncing in glass. Michael ran the diagnostics twice. No stress points, he muttered. Elaine's reply was almost a whisper. Maybe it's not coming from outside. By March 10th, the first crew member, technician Daniel Cole, reported nausea and auditory hallucinations, voices behind the static. Blake confined him to quarters, citing exhaustion. Hours later, the surveillance feed caught Daniel standing by the communication console, headphones on, whispering to someone or something that wasn't there. When confronted, he claimed he was answering a call. The recording of that moment was later classified, but fragments leaked years afterward. A faint voice, repeating his own words back to him, half a second late. Meanwhile, on the surface, Robert Hayes had stopped sleeping. Every time he played back the transmissions from depth 12, the same sound appeared, a faint breathing, steady and deep, under the static. He adjusted the filters, slowed the playback, and realized the impossible. The breathing matched the pulse pattern from the station. He made a note in his log, possible biophonic mimicry, or something imitating them. He sent the report to OceanTech headquarters. It was never acknowledged. Inside the station, Michael woke one night to the feeling that the hull itself was vibrating. Not the normal hum of pumps, a different rhythm, slower, deliberate. He placed his hand on the wall. It pulsed back. He opened his notebook and wrote one line. It knows we're listening. That same night, far above, Sarah dreamed of the ocean, not calm and blue, but black and endless. She saw lights flickering deep below, like eyes opening in the dark. When she woke, her house was silent except for the faint hum of her refrigerator. Then, for a split second, the sound changed 12 pulses, rhythmic, mechanical. The same sequence that had haunted her husband. She sat her day up, heart racing, realizing she hadn't imagined it. Somewhere, somehow, the signal had reached her too. The deeper they went, an OceanTech investigator would later say, the less the station was studying the ocean and the more the ocean was studying them. Chapter 3 Echoes in the Dark. Recording fragment recovered. Sequence repeats 12 times. Origin uncertain, possibly internal feedback, possibly external mimicry. OceanTech Archive, Restoration Division, 2019. When depth 12 went silent. In March 1998. OceanTech labeled the mission as a catastrophic communication failure. That phrase was a bureaucratic mask for ignorance. No wreckage, no remains, no signals. They closed the file, sealed the data, and quietly dismantled what was left of the project. But the recordings didn't disappear. They were stored in a private archive, locked behind layers of classified access codes. 20 years later, someone unlocked them. Sarah Reed hadn't stepped into her old life for a long time. After Michael's disappearance, she'd resigned from the hospital, sold their apartment, and moved to a smaller house outside Portland. Quiet, gray, predictable. She'd kept one thing from that time, the portable radio Michael had modified for her before the dive. He'd called it our link to the deep. For 20 years, it sat her day silent until the night she heard the 12 pulses. At first, she thought it was a dream, but the next day, the sound came again. Not through the radio, through the air itself, faint and rhythmic, like the ocean breathing beneath the house. She began recording it, logging the times, every night, for 17 a.m., exactly the same. Sarah contacted OceanTech's public division, demanding an explanation. They denied everything. The Depth 12 project was never fully operational. The email read, but 2 days later, a small flash drive appeared in her mailbox. No note, no sender. Inside it, a single audio file titled Recovered Transmission 0 for 17. Way. When she played it, the room filled with static. Then, a voice broken, distant, drowning in interference. Sarah, come back. Her hand trembled. It wasn't Michael's voice, but it was someone imitating it perfectly. Meanwhile, beneath the ocean, if Depth 12 still existed, the logs told another story. The last verified entry before contact was lost came from Dr. Elaine Porter, crew exhausted, Commander Blake unstable. Hydrophones record echoes of our own transmissions delayed by 41 seconds. We're hearing ourselves from the past. Engineers who later reviewed this data would call it temporal resonance, feedback loop of sound trapped between layers of pressure and time. But in the raw recording, something else could be heard under the main signal. Whispers, almost human, weaving through the data. On the surface ship, Robert Hayes continued his private investigation. He had saved every log, every waveform, every unexplained spike. When he plotted the frequency of the 12-beat pattern over time, the results from this shape a spiral, like a fingerprint. Each rotation matched the latitude of the depth 12 dive site. Hayes tried to contact OceanTech. Within a week, his access credentials were revoked. 3 days later, his apartment caught fire under unclear circumstances. The official report listed it as an electrical fault. The recovered hard drive contained nothing but a corrupted file named Echo 12. Back in Portland, Sarah began noticing patterns of her own. Streetlights flickered at 4:17 a.m. Her phone glitched, screen pulsing 12 times before freezing. Neighbors said they could hear low rumbling under the ground, like a faraway engine running beneath the street. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The coordinates embedded in the flash drive file metadata. Latitude 36, 184, longitude minus 122, 781. Exactly where depth 12 was last recorded. Sarah packed her old recorder, printed every document she had, and drove north to Seattle to the only person still alive who had heard the last signal, Elaine Porter. Elaine lived in a small coastal town, retired, forgotten. Her house smelled of salt and old paper. When Sarah mentioned depth 12, Elaine frowned. "I told them not to go deeper," she said quietly. "It wasn't the pressure that broke us. It was the silence." Sarah showed her the flash drive. Elaine plugged it into her ancient laptop, ran a spectrum analysis, and stared at the screen for a long time. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Elaine turned the laptop toward her. The waveform was familiar, 12 pulses. Pause, 12 pulses. But when viewed as a spectrogram, the pattern wasn't random. It formed shapes, not symbols, but letters. Spelling one word, below. Elaine exhaled slowly, then said, "That's not Michael calling. That's where he still is." The next morning, Sarah found Elaine's study empty. The laptop was gone, and all of her research files had been erased. On the desk, one note remained, written in shaky handwriting. "You can't call something that never left." That night, Sarah played the recording one last time. She turned up the volume until the static filled the room, and beneath it, softer than breath, almost tender, came another voice. Her husband's. "Sarah, it's listening." Depth 12 had vanished to decades earlier, but the echoes it left behind were only beginning to surface. Chapter 4: The Return Signal. They say the ocean never forgets. But what if it remembers in voices? Extract from OceanTech's Unclassified Mammal, 2002. The storm that hit the Oregon coast that week was the strongest in a decade. Winds howled across the bay, tearing down wires and power lines. But in Sarah Reed's small house, the electricity never went out. Instead, at exactly 4:17 a.m., her radio flickered on by itself. No broadcast, just 12 pulses. Then silence, and a faint voice whispering behind the static, like someone speaking through water. "Sarah, they're coming back." She frowned. It wasn't Michael's voice, it was a woman's. The next morning, Sarah received an email from an untraceable address. No greeting, no signature, just a single line of text. If you want answers, don't call OceanTech. Meet me where it began. Attached was a coordinate tag Port Alton, the harbor where Depth 12's support vessel had launched 27 years earlier. Sarah hesitated. She hadn't been near the seat since the incident, but something in her, a mix of grief and stubborn hope, wouldn't let her ignore it. She packed her recorder, a notepad, and Michael's old ID badge, still scratched and faded. Then she drove north. Port Alton looked nothing like it did in the old footage. The docks were rusted, warehouses abandoned, signs half erased by salt and time. At the end of the pier stood a small cafe, the only place still lit. Inside, an older woman sat her day by the window, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. When she looked up, Sarah recognized her immediately. Dr. Elaine Porter. You shouldn't have come, Elaine said quietly. They're still monitoring this place. Sarah didn't care. I just want to know what happened, she said. You were there. Elaine sighed, watching the storm roll across the gray water. You think they all died, but the truth is worse. We lost contact not because the line was cut, because it was taken. Sarah frowned. Taken by what? Elaine slid a small tape recorder across the table. This was recorded 72 hours before the last transmission. Listen. The tape hissed, then came a low rumble, the sound of metal under pressure. Then voices, distorted but recognizable. Michael and Commander Blake. Blake, that's impossible. No contact below 3,200 meters. Michael, it's not contact, it's reflection. The signal's bouncing from beneath us. Blake, there's nothing beneath us. Michael, then who's answering our pings? The tape cut off suddenly, replaced by a strange rhythmic pattern. The 12 pulses, faster now, like a heartbeat under strain. Elaine whispered, it's not just a sound, it's a call. Sarah spent that night in an old motel near the docks, unable to sleep. She played the tape over and over. At 417A, her phone vibrated, no caller ID, just an audio file attached. The name, return, signal, wave. The file opened automatically. Static, deep rumble, then a voice. Depth 12, ready for surface sequence. Sarah's pulse raced. The metadata on the file listed a timestamp March 3rd, 2025, for 17 a.m. That was today's date. She called Elaine immediately, but the line went dead. When she drove back to the cafe the next morning, the building was empty. On the table where Elaine had Saturday was a single object, a diver's wrist tag, labeled Porter, Retrieval Unit 12. The same day, an article appeared on a small independent news site, OceanTech to relaunch Deep Resonance Project under new supervision. The accompanying photo showed engineers standing beside a familiar diagram, the Depth 12 platform. But something in the image caught Sarah's eye. On the far left of the frame, half in shadow, stood a man wearing a dark coat and a headset. The ID badge on his chest read Systems Control. She stared at the screen, frowning. Michael's face looked older, the lines sharper, the eyes empty. But it was him. And behind him, on the console, The same words repeated on every monitor. Return sequence, Accord IVE. Sarah's world tilted. Either this was a fabrication or Michael had never truly been lost. Somehow, he was still connected to Depth 12. And now, whatever had taken him was reaching back. That night, she received another message, this time handwritten, slipped under her door. They found the station. It's rising. The ocean had given its signal back, but what it carried to the surface was no longer human. Chapter 5, Surface Breach. Contact ray established with an identified deep-sea structure. Object ascending at 07 knots. No response to standard queries. OceanTech internal memo, March 7, 2025. The satellite images arrived without explanation. In the gray expanse of the Pacific, a circular disturbance, a rising column of darker water, spiraling like smoke under the surface. At first, the analysis team believed it was a thermal vent eruption. Then the sonar readings came in. It wasn't natural. Something metallic was moving upward. OceanTech immediately issued a blackout order. All maritime traffic within 100 miles was rerouted. But satellite data doesn't disappear that easily. Within hours, an independent journalist leaked the images online, and the phrase Depth 12 resurfaces began spreading across the dark web. Sarah saw the news at dawn. The coordinates matched the last known position of Michael's expedition. A part of her wanted to believe that he was alive, that somehow he had found a way back. But the rational part of her, the doctor she used to be, whispered, nothing human survives that long below. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull. She packed her car and drove toward the restricted coast, following the old maps Elaine had once shown her, the ones marked with red circles and numbers. Every one of them converged on the same point, Sector 47N, 40 miles off the main shipping route. The same place the radio signals had originated from. At OceanTech headquarters, panic was carefully disguised as procedure. They called it a containment response. But the internal recordings later revealed what really happened that morning. Technician 1, we're getting a return ping from the beacon array. Supervisor, impossible. That array's been dead for 20 years. Technician 1, it's active now, and it's sending crewed codes. Supervisor, who's? Technician 1, all 12. By noon, a Navy surveillance drone confirmed visual contact, a massive object breaching just below the surface. The hull was blackened, corroded, but still intact. Stamped across its side, Depth 12 divided by Atlantic Research Division. The camera zoomed in through one of the fractured observation windows. Something flickered a light. Rhythmic, 12 short pulses, followed by a pulse. Sarah reached the coast just as the first emergency ships launched. The air smelled of diesel and salt. Reporters gathered along the ridge, whispering about a ghost station and the crew that never died. A uniformed officers stopped her near the barrier. "Ma'am, this area is restricted." "I know," she said, showing Michael's badge. "I'm here for him." He hesitated, reading the tag. Something in his face changed, recognition, maybe pity. "Then you'd better see this," he muttered, and pointed toward the sea. Through the haze of storm and fog, Sarah saw it, the silhouette of a submerged structure breaking the surface. The steel frame groaned, venting streams of trapped gas. And from deep within, a low, pulsing sound rolled across the water, the same rhythm she'd heard for months. 12 beats. Silence. 12 beats again. She whispered, barely audible. Michael, as if in answer, the light inside the structure blinked once, a single, deliberate flash. The ship's loudspeakers crackled. A voice came through, garbled but human. Surface contact established. Request. Retrieval. Technicians scrambled to decode it. But before they could respond, another voice overrode the channel, colder, mechanical, layered with interference. Do not answer the signal. It is not them. The words frowned. See everyone. The second transmission came from inside OceanTech's own network, routed through a decommissioned channel that had been dormant since 1998. Whoever or whatever was speaking had direct access to the same system that once monitored the original station. Moments later, the station began to sink again, slowly, deliberately, as if retreating. The light flickered once, twice, then went dark. At 4:17 a.m. the next morning, Sarah's radio turned itself on again. Static filled the room, followed by a whisper she knew by heart. We tried to come back, but it followed us. Then silence. Her house shook. Outside, seagulls screamed and took flight all at once. The ocean, 40 miles away, rumbled like thunder. The official report issued by OceanTech described the incident as a seismic disturbance caused by gas release. No mention of the station. No mention of the voices. But a week later, a cargo vessel near Sector 47N recorded an unexplained transmission on emergency frequency, depth 12, awaiting surface clearance. Sarah listened to the audio file every night, trying to convince herself it was a hoax. But one line, faintly buried in the static, always reached her. Michael's voice, older now, weary. Sarah, don't look for me, look below. Something beneath the surface had awakened, and it was calling her by name. Chapter 6. The Descent again. Some echoes never fade, they just wait for someone to listen again. OceanTech Deep Archive. Entry 12B. It had been 9 days since that surface breach. Officially, nothing had happened. The coast was reopened, the media had moved on, and OceanTech's public statements reduced the event to seismic turbulence. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Each night, at 4:17 a.m., the radio pulsed 12 beats, then a whisper she couldn't quite decipher. At first, it was just sound. Then came the images, faint dreams of metal corridors, flickering red lights, and the hum of pressure systems circling deep underwater. She'd wake up drenched in cold sweat, hearing the station breathing through her walls. It wasn't madness. It was a call. She contacted an old friend of Michael's, David Collins, a freelance oceanographer who'd once worked for OceanTech before leaving over ethical disagreements. David was in his 50s now, quiet, pragmatic, and the kind of man who'd seen too much to still believe in corporate transparency. When Sarah told him what she'd found, he didn't laugh or doubt her. He simply said, if depth 12 really resurfaced, someone will try to find it again, and they won't do it for answers. They met in a small boatyard outside Seattle. David's vessel, the Mariner's Veil, looked modest, but below deck it was packed with sonar equipment, signal analyzers, and a personal submersible. "You're planning to go down there?" Kay asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "If he's still down there, I have to. Then we'd better move fast. Once OceanTech secures the site, it'll be sealed forever." The ocean that night was unnaturally calm, a smooth, black surface reflecting nothing but the sky. Sarah stood at the bow, holding Michael's badge in her hand. David powered the engines, steering toward Sector 47N. By dawn, they reached the coordinates, but the water there wasn't calm anymore. It was breathing. The sonar showed layers of movement below them, not currents, not fish, but something vast shifting in the dark. The readings spiked, forming rhythmic bursts at 12-second intervals. Sarah whispered, "It's the same pattern." David frowned. "That's not a signal, that's a response." At 6:42 a.m., they deployed the submersible. The descent began slow, silent, almost reverent. As they dropped below 2,000 meters, the light from above vanished completely. Only the instrument panel glowed green and blue against the black. At 3,200 meters, the sonar picked up structure. Fragments of metal, curved plating, and then, unmistakably, the letters D12. "Where?" Sarah whispered. "He's there." The submersible lights swept across a vast dome, half buried in the sediment. The hull was cracked, but intact enough to suggest something unnatural had preserved it. As they circled, David noticed something strange. The cracks weren't caused by pressure. They looked like teeth marks. They anchored near a breach in the hull and activated the external microphones. Static. Then, through the noise, came a familiar rhythm, 12 short pulses. David adjusted the frequency, isolating the core signal. A voice emerged, distant, distorted, almost mechanical. "Surface team, oxygen stable. Do not ascend." It was Michael's voice. Sarah's hands trembled. "That's him. It's him." David stared at the waveform. "Sarah, this recording isn't live. It's looping." He ran a quick analysis. The signal had a timestamp embedded in its metadata. March 4th, 1998. "It's a recording from the day they disappeared," he said. "No," Sarah whispered. "Then who's repeating it now?" They entered the structure through the broken hatch. Inside, floating debris, rusted tools, fragments of paper with blurred ink. On one wall, the word below etched into the metal, deep and deliberate. Further inside, the corridor lights flickered impossibly after all these years. The main control room still had power, faint but steady. As they approached, the monitors came alive, one by one, displaying fragments of video, crew logs, faces, voices, and in the last feed, Michael, sitting in the command chair, staring into the camera. "If anyone finds this, the echo isn't external, it's in us. Don't follow it." The feed ended abruptly. David turned to leave, but Sarah couldn't move. She felt the vibration under her feet, a deep, slow pulse. The same 12 beats, but this time, it wasn't coming from the radio or the sea. It was coming from the walls. The metal itself was breathing. The submersible sensors spiked, pressure rising, magnetic interference increasing. David yelled, "We have to go, now." Sarah took one last look at the control console and Francie. On the main monitor, new text appeared, typing itself out in front of her eyes. WELME back, Sarah. The lights cut out. The submersible jerked violently as something massive shifted in the dark. David slammed the controls, forcing the engines to full power. As they rose, Sarah looked down through the viewport and saw the station moving, not sinking, following. When they breached the surface, the sea behind them rippled like something alive. The water frothed, then stilled. No trace of depth 12 remained. Back on the ship, Sarah replayed the last seconds of the recording from her headset. Amid the static, a faint whisper, "You shouldn't have come back." Then, in the background, the unmistakable sound of 12 steady heartbeats. Depth 12 was not gone. It was awake again. And now, it knew her name. Chapter 7, Voices from the Surface. What returns from the deep doesn't always stay there. Sometimes, it learns to echo through us. Anonymous entry, OceanTech incident log. Recovered 2025. For the first few days after the dive, Sarah barely spoke. She and David made it back to Portland under strict confidentiality. OceanTech security team met them at the docks, confiscated the recordings, and forced them to sign non-disclosure agreements. They said it was for their safety, but Sarah could tell from the officer's eyes it was fear, not protection. David disappeared the next morning. His phone went dark. His apartment was empty. Only his dive suit remained, folded neatly on the couch. Inside one of the pockets, Sarah found a torn note. "It's not in the ocean anymore." Sarah tried to return to her old life. She volunteered at a local clinic, kept her head down, told herself that everything she'd seen was the result of exhaustion and grief. But the silence wouldn't hold. It started small, the sink faucet dripping 12 times before stopping. Streetlights flickering in sequence as she walked home. The hum of the refrigerator shifting pitch at exactly for 17 a.m. Then came the voices. At first, they were faint, a whisper under the noise of traffic, the soft murmur of distant static when she turned off the TV. Then, one night, while reviewing her old medical notes, she heard it clearly, a voice, calm and deliberate, coming from the speakers of her unplugged computer. "Sarah, the surface isn't safe." She frowned. The room smelled of salt, the air thickened, and when she turned to the window, condensation had formed words on the glass, 12 short lines, like breaths pressed against the cold. The next morning, Sarah drove to the coast. She needed proof, something to remind her that she wasn't losing her mind. But when she reached the shore near Sector for 7N, the sea was unnaturally still. No wind, no sound, just a vast, gray mirror stretching endlessly. And there, half buried in wet sand, lay something metallic. It was a helmet, standard issue for OceanTech divers. On the side, a name was barely visible through the corrosion. M. Sarah fell to her knees. Inside the visor, she saw not her reflection but Michael's face. Not decayed, not dead, watching her, motionless, as though the glass itself held him. Then the waves washed over the helmet, and when the water receded, it was gone. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She recorded herself speaking, asking questions into the dark. "Michael, if you're there, just give me a sign." Nothing. Then at 4:17 a.m., the microphone activated on its own. Static. soft at first, then rising like a tide. And beneath it, a voice not his, but hers. Don't look for him. Look within. The waveform on her screen was strange, not random noise, but a pattern. She zoomed in, increasing resolution. Each pulse was shaped like a sound wave folded on itself, creating an almost fingerprint-like spiral. She ran it through her software. It spelled a sequence of letters. DSCEND. The next day, Sarah met with an investigative journalist named Mark Jensen, who had been following the Depth 12 case for years. He'd written countless rejected articles, all suppressed by OceanTech's legal teams. When Sarah told him she'd been there, that she'd heard the voices, he didn't doubt her. Instead, he showed her something he'd never published, a satellite photo from the night before, right in the middle of Sector 47 and a faint, circular light glowing beneath the surface. They said the station sank again, Mark said quietly, but it didn't. It moved. Sarah felt her stomach twist. Moved where? Toward the coast. He said, "It's coming back." That evening, she returned home to find her living room lights flickering. Her radio turned on by itself. 12 pulses. Silence. 12 again. Then a sound she hadn't heard since the first incident. Michael's voice. "Sarah, you have to leave. It's already here." The walls vibrated. The floor trembled. Outside, the ocean roared, though she was miles from shore. And when she looked out the window, she saw street lamps swaying in perfect rhythm with the 12-beat pattern. Her phone buzzed. A message appeared. No sender. No number. Just 5 words. WELME to depth 13. Sarah dropped the phone. The hum in the room deepened, not mechanical, but alive. Somewhere beneath Portland, below the sewers, under the foundations of the city itself, the signal was spreading. OceanTech hadn't lost control of it. They had brought it up, and now it was using her voice to speak. The ocean wasn't keeping its secrets anymore. It was teaching them to echo through the living. Chapter 8, the 13th depth. They built Depth 12 to listen. Depth 13 doesn't listen, it echoes back. Anonymous memo. OceanTech Deep Resonance File, 2025. The morning light in Portland was pale, filtered through rain clouds that hum lazily over the city. For Sarah Reed, it felt wrong. Too soft, too serene. She didn't have time for gentle weather. She had a signal to follow. Mark Jensen's satellite photo, the helmet on the beach, the message, WELME to depth 13. They all pointed to something bigger than a missing station. Something that wasn't just underwater. Something embedded. They met again at the edge of the bay. Mark handed Sarah a thin folder of images and logs. His voice was low. Depth 12 wasn't the experiment. It was the trial run. The real project is another level down. Sarah scanned the folder. Technical documents. Classified project names. Sketches of a facility marked Venus 13. They called it THE 13th depth. Mark continued. A rapid deployment station with no archived record. It went missing before Venus 12 was even decommissioned. Sarah's heart pounded. So the signal I heard, it's from there. Mark nodded. Yes, and it's here now. In the archived footage Michael had sent, the station lights had flickered when the 12-beat signal first appeared. Elaine Porter's notes had described it as the foundation of something other than pressure. Now Sarah understood what that meant. They didn't just go deeper in Meterto depth, they went further in resonance. To depth 13. Back at her apartment, the tremor started again, the refrigerator humming with 12 quick pulses, the water tap dripping in time. She opened her laptop and loaded the waveform file. Return. Signal. Wave. She isolated the pattern and zoomed in. The message hid in plain sight. Keep descending. She pressed her finger against the screen. It's an invitation, she said. That night, her dreams changed. She awoke underwater, the station lights behind glass dim, and Michael standing in the corridor. Sarah, he said, it's time to come home. She reached for the door handle of the capsule, but when she looked out the viewport, the ocean was black, and behind it a light, pulsing 12 times, as if someone deep within the earth was counting breaths. At the same time, at a remote facility in northern Canada, a technician found a live feed from the deep resonance array. The screen filled with static. Then, two words slowly typed across the display. Surface is northeast XT. Alarms sounded. The staff scrambled, but the signal wasn't overpowering. It was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah met with David Collins via a secure video link. His face looked tired, haunted. I visited the -13 coordinates last week, he said. No station visible, but the sonar readings showed something alive. Something that moved. Sarah swallowed. Moved where? Up, he answered. And now it's resonating through the continent. She thought of the floods in the Midwest, inexplicable tremors in the sea floor, lights blinking across cities at 4:17 a.m. It's not a station anymore, she said quietly. It's a frequency. David nodded. And frequencies don't stay underground. Later that week, Sarah returned to her clinic's basement, using the old radiology lab as her secret workspace. She set up the recorder, the headset, the signal analyzer. She played the file again, and this time the 12 pulses were accompanied by a voice. Soft, female, come deeper. Her blood ran cold. She looked out the window at the night sky. The stars above Portland were still, but now she knew they weren't watching. They were listening. In the stairwell of the clinic, the lights flickered. 12 pulses, then one long flash. A note appeared on her voicemail, 020111704. She dialed it. A voice answered on the other end. You have unlocked the 13th depth. Descend now. Then the line went dead. She dropped the phone, and the walls around her pulsed. OceanTech's press release the next morning described the disturbance as a deep Earth resonance event. No mention of a station. No warning. But the internal waveforms told a different story. Something had breached, and it hadn't surfaced yet. Sarah looked at Michael's empty workstation at the clinic, the one she had kept as a memorial. She placed his ID badge next to the laptop and touched the screen. I'm coming, she whispered. And she meant it, because when the Depth 13 signal finds you, it doesn't ask to be heard. It demands you join the descent. Chapter 9, The Final Echo. In the end, the signal didn't rise. We did. Final entry. Recovered log from Dr. Sarah Reed. The city of Portland slept under a thick, silver fog. It wasn't sea mist, Not anymore. It carried weight like static woven into air. Every light along the harbor flickered, 12 short pulses, then one long. People called it a power glitch. Sarah knew better. She hadn't slept in days. The recordings filled her walls, overlapping patterns, infinite layers of the same hum she had first heard in the abyss. Mark Jensen's Saturday in the corner, laptop open, eyes wide from sleepless nights. It's spreading, he muttered, through the electrical grid, through sound systems, even water lines. It's all connected now. Sarah looked at the screen. The waveform resembled a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, but no longer human. They called it a resonance, she said, but it's evolution. 3 days earlier, OceanTech servers had gone dark. The government sealed the bay, citing a containment protocol. But satellite data leaked. Concentric rings of light beneath the Pacific, moving outward. Each ring was 12 miles apart. Mark rubbed his temples. If it keeps expanding, it'll reach the coast by midnight. And then, he didn't answer. Sarah took a deep breath. We can stop it with walls or silence. It's in us now. It wants witnesses. Mark stared at her. Witnesses. Every person who listens becomes a mirror. That's how it travels. She played the file one last time. Return. Signal. Wail. The room filled with that deep hum. Soft but heavy, like pressure from beneath the floor. On the spectrogram, words began to form, faint but readable. Depth 13 complete. Surface initiated. Mark stepped back. It's counting down. No, Sarah said, it's calling back. The lights dimmed. The screens flickered. And for a brief moment, the reflection in the glass wasn't hers. It was Michael, smiling faintly, his hand raised, as if signaling farewell. Then the hum shifted tone, not menacing, almost peaceful. The next morning, emergency crews arrived at the clinic. They found the lab empty. No signs of struggle. Only one thing remained. Sarah's recorder, still running. Inside, a single line of audio repeated in an endless loop. We are the 13th depth. Officials labeled the event a localized resonance collapse. OceanTech's name vanished from public records. The world moved on mostly. But sometimes, at first 17 power grids around the Northwest flickered 12 times. Then, for one long breath, everything stops. And in the silence that follows, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear a woman's voice, calm, distant, like someone speaking from under miles of water. Don't look below. It's already here. And of depth 12, the 13th descent.